Hello guys, it's Ryan Ho back with another video. Today I want to talk about the Apos Caspian. This headphone comes in a price of $500, and I think this headphone kind of has the best bass I've heard in open back headphone. And what I mean is that this headphone has really deep bass extension that goes all the way down to like the sub bass, and it's a little bit elevated in the sub bass, and a lot of other headphones don't really have that sub bass response. A lot of them kind of just roll off or just don't extend that well. But even among open back headphones, this bass has actually an elevated like quantity of bass. A lot of open back headphones don't really have the level that this headphone does. And I feel like the type of bass impact and like the feeling of the sub bass rumble as it like goes through you reminds me a lot of like going to like live concerts and like going to like festivals and stuff where you can really hear like the subwoofer like move the floor. Like you can just feel it going through you. And this headphone really has a really great bass response that I think will satisfy a lot of people who always feel like, you know, the bass of like an open back headphone is kind of lacking, or they need to buy like an amplifier that has like a bass boost button, or they need to like EQ the bass. I feel like this headphone has such a good bass response that it should satisfy most people. Let's talk about this headphone, and I want to thank Apos Audio for sending the Caspian out for review, and also sending out the Apos flow cable. Now these flow cables you have to buy separately, they don't come with the headphone. Anyways, please like and subscribe down below. It really helps my videos out. I'm trying to hit that 1,000 subscriber mark, so any help would be appreciated. Anyways, let's talk about the build quality and kind of accessories that you get with this and all of that. All right, so let's talk about the Apos Caspian and everything that it comes with, right? So the Apos Caspian comes with a kind of an eco leather bag. It's pretty big and it fits the whole entire headphone inside. And it has a nice little zipper. As you can see, the headphone fits perfectly inside. And it has pockets inside, so you can put the cables over here. It also has another pocket in here, which comes with a strap, so you can use a strap with this case as well. And yeah, overall this case is really nice, it's big, and it fits the whole entire headphone inside. Now the other thing that it comes with is a cable. So this headphone uses a mini XLR, and it connects into a 6.35 millimeter. The one thing that's worth noting about this cable is that the Apos Caspian is actually a very efficient headphone. So they actually said like they made it very efficient so it could run off of most portable devices like cell phones and laptops, but a 6.35 millimeter doesn't fit into a cell phone or a laptop, so you're gonna have to get an adapter to plug it into. But honestly, this is one of the most easiest to drive headphones I've ever plugged into. Like I barely had to turn the dial on my amplifier before it's like way too loud. It is like the most efficient headphone I've ever used. Apos also sent me their flow cable to test with this headphone with, and I really like using this headphone through Balance XLR. Obviously this headphone's already super efficient, so you'll get even more power out of your amplifier using this. So let's talk about the build of this headphone. So the build of this headphone reminds me a lot of one of my favorite headphones and my first headphones I ever had, which is the HyperX Cloud Alpha. And I'll just bring it in. So the HyperX Cloud Alpha, if you just put it side by side, obviously it's a gaming headphone, so it has a microphone. But side by side, the headband looks about exactly the same, right? And then we have the yoke design, which is very similar. And yeah, this headphone is built very similar to the HyperX, and this is a design that I really like because it's very sturdy. I've dropped this headphone many times, and I can even throw this headphone into my backpack and I know it won't break. And overall, it's a very nice design that's, like I said, very usable. And in fact, I actually use a lot of headphones that have the same design by Beyerdynamic. So we have, this is the Tiger 300R, which is once again a very similar build. We have the padding on top, we have the metal yokes on the side, but these have rounded cups this time instead of the typical oval shaped cups that the HyperX and the Apos Caspian has. But overall, this build is really like, I guess, legendary, especially from Beyerdynamic, and it's really a good build. And of course, there's another Beyerdynamic headphone that once again uses the same type of aesthetic and build of a headband and the metal yokes. So I'm really a big fan of this, as I've already owned 3 headphones that have the same build. So when I see this build on the Apos Caspian, I actually really enjoy it. And I think it's really a great design. Now, the only flaw about this design in general is that these headphones don't really have much swivel, so they don't really rotate, right? Because these are kind of really rigid. We talk about the wood. This wood aesthetic is not my favorite color of wood, and I think it's a little too grainy for me, but it is a wood made cup, and I think if people like their wood aesthetics, this is definitely one that has that. And then it has this nice Apos leather grill over here. And then you can also see under it, there's this like material under that kind of helps dampen the driver as well. And that's the interesting thing about this headphone is that if you actually take out the ear cups, you can actually see the dampener on the inside as well. And this dampener is pretty thick, and I think that influences kind of the sound. And you can actually see the driver kind of pop out a little bit. This is kind of, I think, the protective covering for the driver. But when your ears are kind of against the headphone, you can kind of feel this a little bit on my ears, but it doesn't really bother me. But if you have bigger ears than me, then you might actually feel this case on your ear, and maybe that could be uncomfortable for some people with bigger ears. But I actually found it okay and not a problem for me. Now, the thing I want to talk about is this dampening, right? So there's dampening on the inside and the outside, and I think that's what gives this headphone a really strong bass response. I think that's how it gets that like nice sub bass. But I also think the trade-off of that is that because there's kind of dampening on both sides, I think it does affect the sound stage a little bit and gives this headphone kind of I want to say it's like more like a semi-open headphone, because the amount of sound that leaks out of this headphone is actually not that bad. So like people in the same room, they won't hear it as loud as like something like a Hi-Fi. I tried this headphone next to the Hi-Fi. The Hi-Fi I could hear like super clearly like across the room, while this is a lot less projecting noise through this. However, I think the soundstage does get a little smaller because there's this dampening in the back, and I think it makes it have a less airy than like true, I guess, open back headphones are. Now here we have the leather pads. They're nice and comfortable and squishy. They're actually lambskin leather, and they're genuine leather supposedly. And yeah, I don't really have an issue with the depth at all, but my ear does, like I said, just barely touches the driver. So if you have bigger ears than me, you might have an issue with that. But yeah, with leather, as always, it might get a little hot for you guys if you're not used to them. But for me, I wear leather all the time, so I'm already used to that type of feeling. So on the bottom of this headphone, we also see the port it has. So this is the mini XLR port, and it's a very sturdy connector, but it's a little harder to like disconnect and connect your headphone. But obviously your cable won't kind of slip out as easily as like a 3.5 millimeter will. So then we can test the weight of the Apos Caspian. So the weight should vary depending on kind of the wood they have, but it shouldn't vary that much. But this one is 391 grams. And yeah, it's not the heaviest headphone, but it's also like not the lightest. It's still, I think, lighter than the AirPods Max, which is like pretty much a very heavy headphone. Overall, I really like the build of this headphone. I think it's pretty much what I like. So this is definitely like my ideal type of like fit. Maybe with swivel is the only thing that like I wish these type of headphones had, but honestly, I find it very comfortable. It's made with better materials than the other headphones I have as well. And so yeah, that summarizes the build. So the question really is, how does this headphone sound, right? So when it comes to the sound of this headphone, I really find it to be warm, bassy, and then I don't even want to call it dark anymore, really. I think it's more relaxed in the treble, but in the upper treble, there's actually kind of a sparkle there. So in a way, it is very kind of V-shaped, as in there's bass, there's treble, and the mids are slightly recessed. And I think that's the best way I would describe it. So like I said, the best aspect of this headphone is definitely the bass. It does bass better than any headphone I've basically heard. Like there's other headphones like the HE6 that I think have maybe better bass quality, but it doesn't have the quality and the quantity combined that this does. This literally feels like a built-in subwoofer in your ear, and the amount of sub bass you can like hear, but not only hear, but you can feel, is absolutely ridiculous. Like there's not any other headphones that really kind of do this to me that are basically open back. Only closed back headphones can really get this type of sub bass and like response that I can really feel and enjoy. And I feel like this is the first open back headphone that really made me like, wow, like this is what bass is supposed to sound like. versus like other headphones that, you know, I have that are like, let's say the Tiger 300R. This headphone has bass, but the sub bass is definitely nowhere as pronounced, or you can't even feel it the same way that you can in this headphone. The Tiger sub bass definitely kind of rolls off, but I would say like the mid bass of this headphone is actually pretty good and maybe pretty comparable to this, but it's the deep bass that the Tiger just doesn't have that this headphone does really well. The HD58X, literally when it comes to the bass, it's like not even comparable to this one. I think the sub bass is just much more defined and pronounced in this headphone than the HD58X. And really, it really concludes that when it comes to just bass response in general, I really enjoy this headphone over pretty much every open back headphone I've heard, especially under $500. I really think that's what makes this headphone really a standout. And it makes it hard to compare to other headphones because of just how much kind of more prominent the bass is than other open back headphones, right? The mid-range that comes across is pretty good. I wouldn't say it's like Sennheiser level of like clarity for sure, but there's definitely a good full body presence there, especially in like the lower mids. So like male vocalists especially come across very nice and very kind of defined and everything. And I think that it does a really good job. But when you start entering like the upper mid range and kind of like the lower treble, I think this is the part where this headphone definitely isn't emphasized as much. So like we're talking about like female vocalists kind of in kind of their lower ranges. They have the body in their voices, but then they kind of lack, they sound a little bit more relaxed. They kind of sound a little bit more distant. They're not as present in the mix. And so they're not as clear as you'll hear on other headphones. Like I would say the HE6 probably does it really well in this area, or even like the HD58X, right? Does that area a little bit more. And it's just filled out more in this area. But yeah, so then when we start moving on to kind of the highest frequencies, so like the upper treble, that's where this headphone actually kind of comes back, and it has a lot of definition in that area. I think it's that balance between kind of its lower and its upper treble that makes this headphone a little, I guess maybe a little uneven, but it also gives it that like, I guess, detail and sparkle up on the very top, because it doesn't sound rolled off because the upper treble is very present. You can actually hear them a lot, and I think that's like the most detailed part of this headphone. And the last thing that I alluded to earlier is the soundstage. The soundstage of this headphone is definitely better than something like a Sennheiser, right? The Sennheiser kind of has this like 3 blob effect for the imaging, and the soundstage is very, very close to your head. This is definitely bigger than the 58X. However, it's not as big as like other headphones like my Hyphen Man, right? The HE6. These are definitely a lot wider because like I said earlier, I think the dampening on both sides to kind of tune this headphone to have that great bass response. I think the side effect is that it kind of limits the soundstage a little bit. So you get a little bit more intimate experience with this headphone, but overall it's still bigger than the 58X, so it's not that intimate. So in the end, I find this headphone honestly a fun and engaging experience. If you like bass, really, I think that's what stands out the most about this headphone, and that's really the reason why you probably get this headphone. And overall, the mid-range and the vocals still are pretty present. They're a little bit relaxed, but you can still hear them, and they're very detailed. And this headphone overall is not harsh at all. Like, that's the best thing about this headphone is like, I feel like there's a lot of headphones that kind of overemphasize treble a lot, and this headphone is not one of those. The treble always comes across as very, very detailed, but without ever being over sharpened or just over exaggerated. And everything sounds very, I guess I would say it sounds natural in the upper treble, but the lower treble is probably the one area that this headphone definitely needs more emphasis. This sounds a little bit more natural in my opinion. So also one more thing I want to mention about this headphone is that the Apos Caspian actually shares the same driver as the Magni by Kennerton, and the Kennerton Magni actually sells for $850. And it's a funny thing where if you think about it, they use the same graphene driver inside this headphone, and they even say the same marketing, it's like the same kind of specs. So you're actually getting, I guess, relatively a cheaper Kennerton headphone that has a different tuning for less money in that sense, because that retails for, like I said, $850. This is $500. So you get a graphene driver that is also made of wooden cups. Obviously, it has a different headband as well, and the tuning is obviously different. But that's something interesting to consider as well. So in conclusion, do I recommend the Apos Caspian? I think the Apos Caspian I would recommend for people who love bass. I think this does a very good job. I think this is the type of headphone that's really kind of tailored for those type of people. Obviously, if you like things that are a little bit more airier, a little bit more up top, I think you would like headphones like a Headphone. If you like mid-range, I think you probably like headphones like the Sennheiser series. But I think for bass lovers, this is definitely a headphone that I really would recommend for those people, especially if you're coming from more like consumer-oriented headphones that, you know, have a little bit more bass. I think you won't find this headphone lacking at all. And that's the thing I really like about this headphone, that, like I said, this gets me moving and like reminds me of being like a live concert and event. And that's what the best aspect of this headphone really for me. And that's why I really do appreciate it. And I do actually hope more headphones will have a bass response kind of tune, kind of similarly with like a little bit like elevated sub bass, and can kind of feeling that rumble, because I really think that's a really exciting type of bass to have. And I want to see more headphones like that. And anyways, please like and subscribe down below. It really helps my videos out. Stay tuned for more headphone videos. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.